Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Wow, so much to talk about today. I'm probably going to refer to my notes more than usual because there is just so much detail to go into with each story. But before we delve into the three stories of the day and the viewer question, I just want to remind you that you have only 1 week to go until your BTT Voice videos are due for the next episode. The topic, once again, is the upcoming Bond film Spectre. And so you want to film an approximately 30-second video of yourself sharing your thoughts on this upcoming film and just the Bond franchise in general. You can say anything that you want about the movies, positive, negative, maybe you don't know how to feel about them, anything is valid. Then upload that approximately 30-second video to YouTube as an unlisted video, not a private video, but unlisted. And then send me that unlisted link to grace@gracerandolph.com. And again, you have a week from today, so that's due February 2nd. All right, so let's start with today's stories. Now, while I was coming into the office to film this episode, I ran into a BTT viewer on the street, and she was nice enough to stop me and say hi, and she said she particularly enjoyed my animation coverage. So, of course, we talked about the Lego Oscar snub, and then, of course, what's happening to Dreamworks Animation. And that's the first story of the day. Because to the horror of many animation fans, myself included, it looks like Dreamworks Animation is imploding. Now, we've known for quite some time that they're having problems. They continually underperform at the box office, and then sometimes word of mouth saves the day, and sometimes it doesn't. And unfortunately, recently, most of the time, it doesn't. So Dreamworks Animation wanted to be purchased because the box office roller coaster was wreaking havoc with their stock. Wall Street kept, saying they were a bad investment, and it was just a really bad situation. So Katzenberg wanted to go private. He tried to have a number of companies purchase Dreamworks Animation, but his best bet, but actually seemed to be the only company that was legitimately interested, was Hasbro. And of course, Disney infamously torpedoed that deal by writing Hasbro a letter saying, if you purchase Dreamworks Animation, we'll consider that a conflict of interest, and we will pull all of our Marvel and Star Wars toys from your company, which of course would be a devastating blow for Hasbro. So Hasbro said, sorry DreamWorks, we don't want to buy you anymore. So with no buyer on the horizon, or anywhere, even anywhere, even in the pitch blackness of the future, nobody wants to purchase Dreamworks Animation, especially when Penguins of Madagascar once again underperformed. Now they just won a Golden Globe, right? But still, that's just not enough because the financials are apparently so bad. So Jeffrey Katzenberg is doing everything he can to keep his company alive. 14 years after Shrek came out and really made Dreamworks Animation a major threat to Disney Animation. But oh, how the tables have turned, which is really weird because I don't think the quality of Dreamworks Animation movies has gone down at all. I think they're continuing to put out great product, but for some reason, nobody wants it. It must be so frustrating to be a Dreamworks employee. Although, sadly, for many people, that frustration is over because on Friday, they began layoffs for 500 people in the company. That is a huge number of people to let go, but Dreamworks Animation they say they need to do it to remain profitable. They need to become a leaner and meaner machine. And there are other changes going on as well. And the cuts weren't just at the bottom of the company. They were throughout to the very top. For instance, the chief creative officer had already resigned from Dreamworks Animation, but they fired their head of marketing. No duh, that firing should have taken place a long time ago, I think. And they also fired their chief operating officer. That's the person who's in charge of the business side of the company. Creative handles, obviously, the creative side. And then, as for instance, in Disney, the chief creative officer has always been Walt Disney, but then Roy Disney, his brother, famously handled the business side. He would be the chief operating officer. So that's how companies are usually divided. And then later on, there was a big fight with Frank Wells versus, they got along, but Frank Wells versus Michael Eisner, and then Katzenberg wanting that role. But this is the hierarchy of any studio. So those people have been fired. And then they had their vice chairman retire. He was asked to retire, and it's better than being fired, right? So then the other thing they're going to do is they're going to go from 3 movies a year to 2, which is really an obvious choice. I think 3 is too many for them to focus on, to advertise. I think they oversaturated not just the animation market in general, but their own brand. I mean, I think it seems less special when a Dreamworks Animation movie comes out because one's coming out in the next few months, right? So I think it was smart to downgrade to 2 films a year. I think 3 was just too many. And it speaks to the animation market in general, again, becoming just way too crowded, and I think it's, becoming a bit of a bloodbath, which is interesting for all these PG and G rated movies. But then here's the big aha moment, all right? This is where you're like, no wonder you're having problems. And that's that Jeffrey Katzenberg said, in addition to all these things, I too shall become more involved in the development and producing of our animated films. And I'm like, what? What have you been doing? I mean, that's Jeffrey Katzenberg's strong point. Go watch, I've recommended this before, but go watch the documentary Waking Sleeping Beauty if you have not watched it. It's about how Disney animation came out of its own slump after Walt Disney's death with their animation renaissance, The Little Mermaid, etc. And it not only talks about how crucial Alan Menken's songwriting partner, Howard Ashman, who's one of the great Disney talents and just talents in general of all time, how he was responsible for that, but it really was a two-pronged approach. It was Howard Ashman, but also Jeffrey Katzenberg, although he was, unlike Ashman, not particularly popular with his fellow Disney employees. It's a very fascinating documentary. But Katzenberg, you can see, is a genius. And early on, he was very involved in the kind of films that Dreamworks Animation was putting out. And they've done some fantastic stuff. As we talked about with Exodus recently, I just watched Prince of Egypt again. It's on Netflix. You can stream it. And it's really, really well done. Just a fantastic, not only piece of animation, but just piece of filmmaking in general. So the fact that he would have stepped away from the creative, I feel, is troubling. And if I was someone who was considering purchasing Dreamworks Animation, and I knew that Jeffrey Katzenberg wasn't hand-on in the creative section, I'd be like, I don't want to buy this either. I guess he was trying to work on their other endeavors, like their expansion into China with that whole entertainment district and animation studio, also doing a Netflix deal for an animated series. But again, if you don't have your solid foundation, if you don't have the base, all these other opportunities don't mean anything. And also, I think, again, it's diluting the brand. So, fascinating situation. I'm curious to think if there's anything that you think that can be done to fix Dreamworks Animation, or do you think they can pull out of this, or do you think it's just the beginning of the end? So that's the first story of the day, a lot of doom and gloom. So let's move to a more positive one, and that's the news coming over the weekend that Julia Roberts is going to adapt and co-star in a film version of the documentary Batkid Begins. This, of course, is about that famous and really touching story about leukemia patient 5-year-old Miles Scott and how his wish was to be Batman for a day. So the Make-A-Wish Foundation went to unusually impressive efforts. I mean, it's a wonderful organization. And I think anyone occasionally is reminded of the greatness they do. But this was like fantastic. They got I'm sure you saw the coverage in the news, but they got thousands of volunteers, the city of San Francisco, and even President Obama to chip in to turn San Francisco into Gotham City for a day and to have Batkid, along with an actual, gentleman as Batman, save the day and go on a bunch of tasks and ultimately receive the key to the city. It was just really an amazing thing to do. And it really, I think, also showed the popularity of Batman. So I think that the documentary obviously is getting a lot of attention, but on the I guess you could say the coattails of American Sniper, you can see why this film would become a hot project in Hollywood, right? I think it's a pretty good idea. Considering how well American Sniper is doing, I think this is in a similar vein of something I think America, and particularly the American heartland, is going to want to celebrate. Now, there's something else they can do to even further supercharge the success of such a film. Now, on the side note, not to say people on the coast and the rest of the world don't want to celebrate, Batkid and the Make-A-Wish Foundation, but if you can really get that sweet spot of getting everybody to go to the movies, you can make a lot of money. I mean, they studied the success of American Sniper, and while a lot of people went to see the movie, and for instance, Texas was a really big place where the movie performed very well, it still did very well in New York City and other, coastal cities to make up that 90 million wide number for its first weekend as a wide release. So anyway, I think that Julia Roberts doing this is a great idea. Now, there was something else I said to supercharge it. And someone recommended, and I was reading an article of this, and someone in the comment section said, well, I hope they give part of the proceeds of the movie to leukemia research and the Make-A-Wish Foundation, which made this whole scenario happen for real for Miles Scott, who actually does suffer from leukemia. And I thought that was a fantastic idea. It reminds me of what Disney does with their Disney Nature documentary, saying opening weekend of portion of the proceeds will go to a certain organization. And so I hope that they would do the same with this film. And I think it would really further increase people's interest in seeing it in theaters, because it's in a rare instance you would be seeing what you'd be funding. It's like the ultimate Kickstarter movie. So I think this sounds like a wonderful idea, and I'm curious to what you think as well. Do you think you would see this movie? And do you think Julia Roberts can do a good job making this a narrative? instead of, should this only be experienced as a documentary? It's similar to the whole situation with Man on Wire about the tightropist who walked between the two World Trade Center towers. That was a really successful documentary. And now it's going to be a narrative film from Robert Zemeckis starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt. At what point should a film just stay as a documentary, and what point does it need to make the jump to a narrative film to reach a wider audience? And it's the old argument, it's why does nobody want to watch a documentary? All right, so the other thing I wanted to mention with this is that it also will, I think, touch on the popularity of Batman just in general as a character. Batman is an incredibly popular character, and this is signaled by a story that also broke on Friday about the top 25 passwords for 2014 for people online. And one of the top 25 passwords was Batman. So if Batman is your password, you should change it. Now, to be fair, Superman was also one of the top 25 passwords, but a Marvel character was not. So I think DC fans will really appreciate that. And I think that just underscores what Warner Brothers has, that they have these iconic characters that are just on people's minds, just in general, even without the movies or television shows or the comics. It's just a part of society. I think that's really awesome. Also, if you want to see what the other top 25 passwords are for 2014, I've included a link down in the video description to that article. Now, speaking of DC, something else that someone wrote me on Friday from Keyblade Chosen One. Sometimes I have to decipher your YouTube handles. But this BTT viewer had a theory as to why Warner Brothers is having trouble with their DC films. And what they came up with ultimately was that it was a blind loyalty to talent, that they would allow Nolan's films to stay separate instead of building on them for the cinematic universe. Now, I know some of you feel they can't be built on. I feel they could have been, and I think clearly so does Keyblade Chosen One. But furthermore, Keyblade Chosen One points out that they gave the gig to Zack Snyder for Man of Steel because he was really close to not only Warner Brothers but Christopher Nolan. Instead of going with Darren Aronofsky or Duncan Jones, who took over Warcraft eventually, the director of Moon, David Bowie's son. But those were other names that were in contention for the gig. But they went with studio loyalty to an in-house talent, Zack Snyder. And also, you could even say, I think you could very realistically say that Ben Affleck got the role of Batman, furthermore, because of Warner Brothers' loyalty to talent. This is a model that Jeff Robinov came up with, also very popular, very friendly with Leonardo DiCaprio. It was very effective for Warner Brothers for quite some time, and I think arguably still is. Although I think Keyblade Chosen One might have a point that it's a little bit detrimental to them in terms of their DC movies, that they can't get the best talent, whereas Marvel, as Keyblade Chosen One pointed out, had no problem parting with Edgar Wright. There's loyalty, but to a point. So what does this have to do with the story? You're probably wondering why Margot Robbie's picture is up here. Well, she is the next talent that Warner Brothers is trying to really foster and have be an in-house talent and brand name for them. Now, they didn't distribute Wolf of Wall Street, but Warner Brothers is the studio behind Focus, her upcoming film with Will Smith, and they're repairing them again. I guess they like what they see as their Deadshot and Harley Quinn in the upcoming Suicide Squad movie. Warner Brothers is also behind the new Tarzan film with Margot Robbie as Jane and Alexander Skarsgård as Tarzan. So there's another project that's developing around Margot Robbie, and sure enough, Warner Brothers really wants it. There's a bidding war between the studios, and Warner Brothers is aggressively going after it because they feel Margot Robbie is their talent. So the project is called Dangerous Odds, and it's the true story of Marissa Lancaster, who is a model turned a high-end person in sports illegal gambling, an organization that handled that. So she was like this top model, and it was a whirlwind situation where she was, making lots of money and was romantically involved with her business partners, or, at different times maybe. But then she eventually ended up in the Dominican Republic. And to quote the coverage of this, at that point, her life became a nightmare of incarceration and rape. Now, when The Wolf of Wall Street came out and we were discussing Margot Robbie, at one point I said I thought she was the new Sharon Stone. And I believe that very strongly. And I think that based on the roles that she's choosing, she is the new Sharon Stone. Now, of course, it didn't turn out so great for Sharon Stone. And I think it's easy to forget that for a while, Sharon Stone, after Basic Instinct, was a hot commodity in Hollywood. She got a lot of projects. She was starring in films. She was a named talent. She's faded considerably, but that's partially her own fault for choosing some really bad projects. And also, some people say getting really bad plastic surgery. I thought her plastic surgery looked pretty good. She looked excellent in Catwoman, but she was also in Catwoman, opposite Halle Berry. So I think that this will be interesting to see if Margot Robbie can walk the same path, but with more success. And also, it's always very dangerous to hypersexualize yourself as an actress. Now, I think the Harley Quinn role is huge for her, and if she can pull that off, and if it's well written and the character design is well done, that could go a long way to being a safety net for her. But if she just really plays at the sexuality of the character and doesn't make the character likable, I mean, it's a struggle. I still struggle with Harley Quinn today, as I think many readers do. I read an excellent, one of you tweeted me actually an excellent story about someone taking their young daughter, like 8 years old, into a comic book store, and her like not wanting to read Harley Quinn because she felt Harley Quinn wasn't dressed appropriately, you know, and just that reaction I thought was really fascinating, especially because Harley Quinn was considered sexy when she was fully clothed on Batman the Animated Series. But that's a whole other conversation. But anyway, if Margot Robbie can pull this off, that'll be, again, a huge safety net for her. But she's still sexualizing herself in other roles. You know, obviously in Wolf of Wall Street, Focus is a very sexual film. And then Tarzan, Alexander Skarsgård is famous for being willing to get naked. Tarzan, when it started out, was a very sexual film. A lot of on-screen nudity at that time. I mean, you're talking about a black and white film with full frontal nudity for its female actress. So I think it's reasonable to consider that film will go in that direction. And then you have this movie about a woman, obviously she did some really interesting things, but I think rarely when you don't watch Goodfellas and, see Ray Liotta's character being raped. It's a twist on it that's, I think, distinctly the way people want to see female characters. And on another side note, I don't know if everybody saw Ruth Wilson's comments about unfair leaning on actresses for sex scenes because you can't show male full frontal nudity as much as you can female frontal nudity. And how it's I'll put the link to that in the video description as well. Just a fascinating thing about how it's not evenly balanced in terms of who has to provide titillation in scenes. So Margot Robbie, though, really seems to be playing into this angle of herself as an actress, like part of her identification. And we'll see if it works for her. But I just think it's very interesting. I think it's dangerous because I think it's a turnoff somewhat to female fans, and that's a really big part of the movie-going audience right now. And also, it's in huge contrast to actresses like Keira Knightley and Scarlett Johansson, who initially did go the sexy route. It got them a lot of fame, but it didn't really get them a lot of box office success. And as both those actresses are moving away from that and are actually at the high points of their careers, both of them. I mean, Scarlett Johansson more so than Keira Knightley, but I think one of the reasons Scarlett Johansson is so well liked is because Black Widow hasn't been over-sexualized, really sexualized at all, and I think that's fantastic. So I'm curious what you guys think. What do you think of Margot Robbie in general? What do you think of the career choices she's making? Do you think she's the next Sharon Stone? Do you have a problem with her being so sexualized, and not just a few roles, but every role she takes on? And just what do you think? Do you think Warner Brothers is right to pick her as a talent they want to invest in? All right, so those are the 3 stories of the day. The viewer question comes from Solomon Dow. And Solomon says, "Hi, Grace. I have a question about Disney's current efforts to stray away from the true love idea that incorporated into their old films for true love that comes from a family member." So basically saying, as for now, they have all been females saving other females, Frozen, Brave, and Maleficent. But I would love to see this idea applied to a female character's true love save her father or her brother, or a male character's true love saving his brother or father. Heck, what about a female saving a male who has a strictly platonic relationship? So do you think that Disney will consider going that route to respect their fans who are not female and or don't have sisters, or stick with this female saving female idea since it has proven to be lucrative? Great question, Solomon. Really well put, and I think that you've hit the nail on the head on what Disney is really has succeeded with. I also recommend you check out my Strange Magic review from over the weekend, because I think that movie does a great job of playing with, ideas of love as presented in fairy tales, and it's not just in a, girl-on-girl way. Now, I would also say that the first thing that occurs to me is that, yes, it would be great to see Disney celebrate parents and not just always kill them off, right? That's kind of like Disney's go-to move. Like, it's an orphan, or, emotional growth through loss. Although on Big Hero 6, I had a problem with that. This is a spoiler. If you haven't seen Big Hero 6, click away right now. But, not only did Hiro have to lose his parents, but he lost his brother Tadashi. That was an incredible amount of loss. And I think there are other ways to get character growth. Some people have said that movie is about death, but I think in a very subtle way. Not enough to counterbalance the loss for the character. But anyway, also that was a situation where they celebrated 2 brothers. The problem is, though, is that Big Hero 6, while a success, is not a home run like Frozen. It's a solid hit. And Disney's going to really work hard to duplicate their home runs, not their solid hits. So I think they tried to do something, a similar type of relationship with a brother, but at the end of the day, did they really? It was really more about Hero having a great relationship with a balloon. And I think that if they had focused more on the brother relationship throughout the whole film, it would have stuck more and been maybe, I think, something that was a little bit more something audiences could relate to and associate with the film. Right now you have to go a really roundabout way. I mean, people are always, there are Tadashi balloons for you to purchase at the theme parks. There are Baymax balloons. Although, I guess people like Olaf a lot too, and that's a big merchandise selling point for Frozen, and it's not just all Elsa and Anna. So anyway, I think that the short of it is that Disney is going to go, as you said, Solomon, where the money is. And for right now with animation, it's female-centric products. Now, that's not saying the audience is entirely female, but that seems to be their sweet spot when it comes to animation. It's why they're fast-tracking their Polynesian, princess movie Moana, because that just seems to be where Disney has its success. So I think they're not going to be doing this for quite some time because Big Hero 6 wasn't huge for them, and I think that Frozen was, and that's just I think the bottom line of it. And I'd also like to point out that Disney has had a hard time with the male demographic in animation, just period, for pretty much forever, and it's the whole reason that they can't crack it, and that's why they purchased Marvel and Star Wars, to get more male fans into the theme parks and into the company, and just to have an interest in what Disney's doing overall. And that's why they had to make those purchases, and that's why it was worth $8 billion to them, $4 billion apiece, because they just know that on Disney Animation, they just can't get the male viewer interested in their properties. It's a fascinating problem. So I guess on one hand, I'm interested to know if you guys would like to see what Solomon suggested about platonic relationships and familial relationships beyond just two women. And also, do you think that Disney Animation could ever appeal to guys? And why doesn't it appeal to guys? Guys, when you've seen Disney animated movies, what keeps you from being excited about them? All right, so thank you so much. Thank you, Solomon, for your question. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question. And don't forget to submit your own questions and to submit those videos for BTT Voice by February 2nd. Thanks for watching.